Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another edition of What Do You Think? My name is Bill Morse, and if you have viewed the program before, you know that this is a call-in program. In a couple of minutes, you'll see call-in Zoom information that you can use to access the program and become part of the discussion. Today is Thursday, September 9th, 2021. And just as an important recognition, we are 2 days away from the 20th anniversary of the multiple terrorist attacks that took place on September 11th, 2001, 2001, excuse me. And Kurt, who is a frequent caller, a frequent flyer to this program, has mentioned that PBS has been carrying an investigative documentary on the events that led up to 9/11 and the aftermath. Much of that aftermath we have been living with for the last 20 years, and that is our occupation of certain areas of Afghanistan and our recent or ongoing withdrawal from that country, leaving it in the hands of the Taliban, which we have labeled a group that has been responsible for attacks. So, I had one question for viewers and Kurt if he calls in. I remember, because I haven't seen the documentary from PBS yet, but I'm curious if the films that show the planes attacking or going actually into the two Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan, if there were actually two planes or just one. I'm not, I remember in 2001 seeing multiple repetitions of one plane flying into one of the two towers, but I'm curious if there was film footage of a second plane going into the towers. Perhaps I'm overlooking that. There was also a third tower that was destroyed in this attack, and I'm not sure what was the cause of its demolition or the demise of the unfortunate people who were trapped inside. As you remember, we lost over 5,000 people during that terrorist attack, and there are still lots of questions. Personally, I believe there is more information to be divulged to the public. We do not know the whole story. There was some investigation into the FBI's handling of evidence they had of an impending attack and what they did with that evidence. And I would like a little more information on their handling of the evidence they had in their hands, physical evidence, prior to the attack. And Kurt, I see you are there. Let me just... Hey, Kurt, are you in the house? Let's see. You need to... Okay, let's try it now. Kurt, are you in the house?
I am now.
Very good. Welcome aboard. I don't know if you heard me. Yeah, welcome aboard. I don't know if you heard my question earlier, but I was just piggybacking on our conversation last night on the phone regarding the PBS documentary, or the investigative documentary that you that you recommended that I see, and I'm just passing that information along as well. Kurt, when you watched the documentary, did they show film footage of both planes going into both of the towers, or was there just one plane going into one of the two towers? Do you remember?
I think they showed both.
Okay. The reason I ask is because with computer-generated imagery, I have seen pictures of one plane going into the first tower, but no plane going into the second. But you have seen two different planes go into the two different towers.
Absolutely. And I do recall, unfortunately, the day that it actually occurred, I was at work with a number of other people, and we had a television at work and had heard of the news. And I mean, I literally remember the ugly thing where the second plane had tilted maybe at a 35-degree angle. You could hear the scream of the turbines. He really, put full fuel to it just prior to hitting the building, and it just punched right into the building in the front, cut an image of an airplane in it, and in the back just blew out nothing but flames off the other side of the building.
Okay.
So it's pretty clear what had happened.
All right. Do you recall a third tower that was also demolished in this attack?
Yeah, I think it was called Tower 9.
Okay. And that tower was not attacked by a plane. Do you know offhand? Did they discuss why that tower went down?
I think it was heat, and also there's an immense amount of heat that had occurred in there. I mean, most of the stuff that had when they went sorting through it, most of the stuff was literally ash, and I think some of that, when the buildings came down, had also gone to the neighboring building. No one's really clear about the Tower 9, but it did take a while before that one came down, much later.
Okay, so it wasn't 1, 2, 3. It was 1, delay 2, and then longer delay for the third tower.
Correct.
Okay, I understand. All right, well, thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate it. My only question was there a discussion as to the FBI's handling of people that they had been tailing, potential terrorists or alleged terrorists that had been prepping for taking over command of these aircraft and zeroing them in on the two towers? Was there anything in the PBS investigative documentary that looked at that?
When I actually tuned in, I probably would say I missed, I don't know, maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes. I don't recall seeing that, but I sure do remember after it occurred that there was some stuff leaked out that they were aware of an imminent attack. But I'm not sure on the telegram whether they brought that up or not.
Okay. I think they were not only aware of an imminent attack, but they had names of some of these terrorists, and they knew that they had been taking lessons at flight school. I mean, down
in Florida.
Yes, if this is true.
They were aware of that.
If this is true, and where was the follow-up? It's almost unbelievable, but I'm curious if this investigative documentary turned up more information, or if more information was released from the archives of the FBI, because I think that's an important area of uncertainty to clear up, because had they known about the impending attack, known the names, the identity of some of the attackers in this team of terrorists, and done nothing, or through a snafu of one or the other, a mistake, or somebody or people dropped the ball, then we need to know that, so that not so much to point the finger of blame, but to know, was this intentional? Was this an intentional screw-up, or was this an honest mistake that somehow took place despite protocol and guidelines that the FBI operates by?
Yeah, there's an appearance, particularly I do recall seeing one program that I was unaware of, that after the first tower, the two towers were attacked, it didn't take long. One, they didn't expect, but when they saw two of them, they knew something was awry, and they started looking at plane traffic and had realized that 2 additional planes had taken turns from their programmed flight path. And I was unaware that actually, I can't remember if it was Rumsfeld or whomever, but one of those higher-ups was contacted by the Air Force and actually gave the go-ahead to actually shoot down the plane that unfortunately had already crashed in Pennsylvania. But I was unaware that they had gotten to that point, but it seemed like no one knew what to do when all of that was happening. I mean, there was a lot of mayhem going on in terms of even the president. They wouldn't let him go back to Washington. They diverted him off to the west. I mean, everything, if it was something that they had expected, they sure acted like they didn't, because there was a lot of confusion that morning.
Well, you have to think who the president was. I know George, no, it's not a put down. It's not necessarily a put down. I'm just saying George Bush, from my perspective and the perspective of many other people, took his cues from Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, who were friends of his father's. He was, correct. In my opinion, he was put in there so that he could be a mouthpiece for voices behind the curtain, people who were pulling the lever, such as Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, and other people that were active in his father's administration, which followed the Reagan administration, during which George Bush Sr. was vice president. So there's a web here, and it's very important to remember the connections, because their influence had a very large impact. And that's why I really think for us to come clean and at least bring some peace to the families who lost not just first responders, but workers in those buildings, to know exactly what happened, why it happened, and the role especially of the FBI and of the Bush Jr. administration, which had these holdovers from his father's previous administration. I think that's extremely important, because otherwise you're going to have questions about this, because many people sense or they don't believe they've been given the full story. So,
well, us being a little older, I recall having the same feelings about the Kennedy assassination. The answers are still not forthcoming, and here we are, almost 60 years later.
Both Kennedy assassinations.
We may never know.
Well, I'm hoping for our country to move forward in its democracy and mature, that those answers come out. I mean, even though all those implicated have passed on, either upstairs or downstairs, many downstairs, I believe, in my opinion, for their role in what transpired, what happened with both assassinations and with other activities that happened in not only the 60s, but the 50s and the 70s. We have to come to grips with that. And I think for us to have a more thorough understanding and to be able to teach this to children or young adults, not children, but younger adults, so that they can see these are the shortfalls that are possible in a democracy that has a shadow government pulling the levers behind it. And I believe that's been the case. So, any other comments on 9/11 as we're 2 days away from the 20th anniversary? We're going to be seeing each other. We should have a toast or have some type of recognition on that day, Kurt.
A memorial service, honestly.
Well, even if it's just two of us.
Not even living in Connecticut, I have 2 people that I work with that had lost relatives in the tower.
No, yes.
I mean, it affected a lot of people, and still, it's just the fact that people are really taken back that it was really the first very strong attack on America directly in quite a long while.
Since Pearl Harbor.
We fought a lot of wars on our other planes, but for our own country to be attacked, especially a major city like it was, the two of them, it's just it's disappointing. And with what's brewing for the future, I just hope it doesn't repeat itself.
No, well, we've discussed the many ways that the episode, our country's episode in Vietnam, has repeated itself in a number of ways through our 20-year occupation of Afghanistan. So, okay. Anything else, Kurt, on that subject?
No.
Okay.
No.
I wanted to talk about an issue that's come up, especially now because students are going back to school. Children are showing up for the first time in kindergarten, nursery schools. They're seeing their teachers for the first time, first, second, third, fourth grade. And at one time, Bellows Falls had a newspaper of its own up until the mid-'60s. I believe it was called the Bellows Falls Times. And then at one point, Kurt, it consolidated with the Springfield Reporter, Springfield being the next city up the line, so to speak, up the Connecticut Valley. And it was a daily paper. It carried national news. And unfortunately, as is the case with many newspapers, it's no longer with us, no longer providing local insight into local events, national events, and international events. So the Shopper is what we have. This was the Labor Day edition from September 1st. And the lead article shows a young girl, I'd say about 3, 4, maybe 5 years old, with a mask on. And the headline says, Fall Mountain will require masks to begin this year. Many people remember that last year's, not last year, year before, school was canceled, at least in Vermont, and I'm not sure about New Hampshire, around middle of April when the pandemic first broke out. And we had distance learning or remote learning for many students, but not all, given the technical nature of that type of a connection. And so I just wanted to read about a meeting between the Fall Mountain School Board. Fall Mountain region comprises a number of towns across the river from Bellows Falls. And I think it duplicates this article is good because it's a very good example of the discussion taking place all over the country. And it says, Langdon, New Hampshire. Choosing to side with caution to start the year, the Fall Mountain Regional School District will require its students and staff to wear masks indoors based on county-wide infection rates. We're talking about Sullivan County. County-wide infection rates regardless of community spread in its district towns. The Fall Mountain School Board adopted on Monday by a vote of 4-2. I guess that's not considered a tie. Oh, no, 4-2, excuse me, I just got it, brain fart. A vote of 4-2, the district's proposed reopening plan for 2020-2021 with an amendment to review the plan within 60 days. I think many school districts are following that example, looking to see how the numbers or the caseload works between now and 2 months from now. The plan, which can be viewed online on the district's homepage, will require mask wearing inside school buildings where there is a substantial level of community spread within Sullivan or Cheshire counties. Now that's in parentheses, so that's someone's opinion. or there are 5 or more active cases of the novel coronavirus within the school district, which consists of 12 total towns that span 12 total schools, that span across 5 towns. Substantial spread, in parentheses, according to the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services, constitutes an infection rate of 100 or more active cases per 100,000 people. Now, I'm going to say that's 0.1%, wouldn't you, Kurt? 100 out of 100,000 is 0.1%? Come on, you're the engineer. You're the engineer. I know it's the end of the day.
It was a rough ride getting home tonight.
Oh,
It's raining
yeah.
like crazy here.
What's 5 plus 7?
But it sounds it's either 0, 1, or 0.1. But
I think 0.1 would be 1,000,
yeah,
but it's not 1,000, it's 100, so it's 0.01. So we're talking
Yeah,
a rate of
that sounds better.
0.01. The state defines a moderate rate as 50 to 100 active cases per 100,000 people. Under Fall Mountain's reopening plan, a moderate community spread would only trigger an indoor mask requirement where a physical distance of 3 feet between individuals is not possible. All right. Many moderate community spread. Again, we're not sure what that is. You got to really watch the language in articles, regardless of what the subject is. Many New Hampshire school districts, including Claremont. Now, Claremont's about 20,000 people. I think now it's kind of shrinking. But I believe it's still at least 20,000 people in Claremont, are adopting the state's community spread matrix to determine when mask wearing should be optional or mandatory. However, many school boards, including Fall Mountain, have also questioned its application. A common board inquiry, as recently demonstrated in Claremont, Fall Mountain, and Newport's about 5,000 or 6,000 people, is why the state recommends using county data to calculate the district's community spread, which can differ dramatically from the district's town. In other words, you have towns that have anywhere from 800 people to maybe 5,000 people, and so it's different than when you're counting in communities of 20,000 people or more. Is there a reason why we don't look at case numbers specifically within our district? Asked Fall Mountain School Board member Craig Vickers of Walpole. If we follow this matrix, you could hypothetically put us with cases between our 5 towns, with Claremont and Keene, that have substantial community spread. Districts have the option to define community as town-specific according to other superintendents. Both the Claremont School Board and the Newport School Board considered that option last week, though the infection rates in both towns were also at the substantial level, rendering the question moot. Well, that begs, what was the substantial level? In fact, Claremont's infection rate was significantly higher than the county. I don't know what that infection rate was or is. It's not mentioned in the article. Yet that data is quite different in the Fall Mountain community, whose town populations are smaller and more sparsely distributed. As of Monday, August 23rd, again, we're talking about before school, only Walpole, with 5 active cases of the virus and town population of approximately 3,700, would be categorized as having a substantial community spread under the state matrix. Now, I question that. We're talking 3,700 people. If 4 of them had been infected with the virus, that would be 0.04%, right? Now, is 0.04% considered substantial? I question that. And let's just say that there is some rogue town that happens to be in our county where their spread spikes because they are doing nothing to mitigate it. Well, nothing to mitigate it, that's kind of a broad statement. People are always doing something, even if they're just having children wash their hands before they eat or whatever. That data could impact us simply because we share the same county but aren't looking at our numbers, which is a valid point. Superintendent Lori Landry justified the rationale to factor the infection numbers in communities like Claremont and Keene, given the number of district employees who commute and general travel of residents to these communities. All right, my question there is, I wonder if when the point will come when the teachers, I wonder if the teachers are given the mandate or given the option of either weekly testing or a vaccine. I don't know. We are a mobile society, Landry said. We don't just live with our cooperating towns. Board member Shelley Andrus of Charlestown expressed similar concerns about relying upon the matrix. Charlestown, the largest of Fall River's participating towns, currently has only one confirmed active case of the virus, one infection, and in its population of approximately 5,100 residents. So given that one infection, we're talking about a 0.05 rate. Now, is that considered substantial? I can't see that 0.05 being substantial. Andrus, but we don't know what substantial is. It's not defined in the article. Andrus ultimately decided to vote in support of the plan, citing two reasons. The first reason was the addition of the 60-day deadline to review the plan, which is smart. I agree with that. Regardless of what they do, they should always periodically check and see what the current situation is. 60 days, fine, including its mask policy. You revisit everything. The second reason, Andrews said, was her concern about the pre-kindergarten and early elementary students who are not eligible to receive the COVID-19 vaccination and depend entirely upon the protective services made by the community as a whole. Now, we can look at that a little bit later. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if something happened to one of these kids, Andres said. If there are no cases in the school or minimal cases, hopefully we can talk about this policy more in 60 days and possibly revise it. Vickers and board member Alyssa Bascom of Charlestown cast the two opposing votes in the minority. Both members said that they would prefer, and this I think is very important, both members, Bascom and Vickers, said that they would prefer to entrust district parents to make masking decisions for their own children. Therein lies the responsibility, I think, of the parents. Anyway, just to finish this up, board chair Sarah Vogel did not cast a vote due to blah, blah, blah. She disagreed with the belief that mask-wearing decisions should be left solely to the students or parents. Well, I would say parents, students are not old enough to make, if you left it to students, they wouldn't wear masks unless they were receiving a strong message from the home or the school perhaps. Anyway, that was a synopsis of what went on during that meeting, and as I said before, that meeting I'm sure took place in hundreds of locations across this country. Any comment on the article, Kurt?
Well, in terms of being concerned about, is it 0.04 or 0.05, what really is a tolerable level and an intolerable level, one of the things I'd like to remind everyone is the fact that both the CDC and the WHO have both declared that the Delta variant is imminently more able to propagate than the earlier COVID-19. And if you back off to a year ago where we were, you took a look at the initial reactions, because really the whole world community didn't know how to respond to this. The knee-jerk reaction was to basically close the schools, educate the kids remotely. There was a scramble to do that. And you, being an educator, know the problem of trying to teach children, and the concept of doing it by remote control by basically a computer. But the thing is that the fact that the variant is so much more able to spread, and this year the majority of the schools around the country have taken a different approach of saying, come on kids, come on down and let's educate the way it used to be. I don't think we're ready for that yet. There still has to be an additional step taken to try to protect these kids, because as I said before, they're not vaccinated. That hasn't been vetted yet 100%, or who knows what percent. So the thing is, they're going in to a very public area with, in some schools, as you well know, our older schools have improper ventilation. The air exchanges aren't the same as a more modern school. We've got a lot of variables, and I wouldn't hang my hat on 0.04 or 0.05 trying to determine any tolerable level. The only thing that is known, even though that masks, the different quality of masks and their efficacy is all over the place, I still think the fact that if masks were still, just like it would be if you went into any hospital in an infectious ward, they're going to put gowns on you, gloves on you, everything. And to try to educate children in that kind of environment, I don't think that's possible. I think we should at least mandate that the minimum be done and at least put masks on them and try to spread them apart as much as they can. And it's so unfortunate. I know as an educator, I mean, particularly like with teachers that are working with speech pathology, how do you even know the kids are enunciating properly because they're behind a mask? I mean, really, this is a job for both. That makes it for the teachers. It makes it much more. But the thing is I don't know. I mean, what's going on now in southern states that have been open for a couple of weeks, already some states are going back to remote control learning over an internet. They're already experiencing negative effects, and they're seeing a lot of children getting the virus, and some of them being hospitalized. And I don't know. I mean, this is going to be a rough fall, and we just don't know. No one knows. I would rather be proactive and mandate children wear them than wait to find out, well, whoops, I guess maybe they should have had it. And now you've got a herd of children all across the country that are infected and infecting others.
To your point earlier, and then I'm going to catch up with what you just last said, Kurt. Special education children. Bellows Falls, I know, has roughly between 20 and 25% special ed rate. In other words, out of every 100 children, you have between 20 and 25 that have special needs or need a separate program. They cannot learn within the one-size-fits-all that generally is used in a regular education classroom. And I know that many of them did not receive services. Remote is not feasible because, first of all, parents aren't always there to follow up. There are internet connection issues. You are actually putting too much responsibility, I feel, on the student. And in some cases, you're talking about someone who's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I think, and I'll use the word ludicrous, to expect a child to make up for that type of slack. I think it's the adult's responsibility to find another way, or to really look hard at the information they've been given as to infection rates, what the infection is. We've talked about COVID here. You brought up the Delta variant. There's another variant that's waiting in the in the background that the government is already... yes, that the government is already preparing for. And people have to think, where the hell are these variants coming from? And if I was, let's say, an evil wizard, and I wanted to weaken an adversary, I would do that by getting that adversary either sick or making that adversary so paranoid that that adversary would not act. And I think part of not acting is not adequately educating children. And I will go along with the masking for, I would say, they say 2 months. I'd rather have it a month, but we'll see. I question the risk level. In fact, before we go to this clip that takes us to the audience that's listening to a mental health practitioner tell about the masks wearing effects on small children, I wanted to share some information that's not available generally on mainstream media. And that is the information from other countries and other countries that have studies that have taken place over the effects of school children wearing masks. And this information is from a report that's available on YouTube from a Dr. Jim Meehan, medical doctor. And he cites in one of his chapters, starting on page 79, studies in Germany, Sweden, and Finland, and also New South Wales and Australia, that look a little bit at the infection rates. Again, this is older information, Kurt. I'm not going to address what we talked about last night, the hospitals, according to CBS News, filling up with people or children that are infected. This is really just only up, this information is current only up until the last couple of months. It's not current. But I think it's indicative in that we're dealing COVID or the Delta variant. I think what we need to look at is our reaction to these threats. The German study was done in Dresden, and it dealt with 1,500 children, 500 teachers from 13 different schools across Saxony. I'm not sure, I don't know if Rossfein was one of them, but perhaps, who knows. And of those teachers and children, again, this is not recent, this is probably at least a couple of months old, 12 of them were infected or showed SARS-CoV antibodies. In other words, they had the virus. 12 of them, which is 0.06%. They were treated and there were no fatalities. Going to Sweden, similar time frame. In Sweden, it was interesting because Sweden, not only were the schools open, but the children were unmasked. And Finland, I'm not sure if the children were masked or unmasked, but Finland had closed their schools like we did here the latter part of spring when the pandemic broke out. And their rate of infection was 0.05%. So we're talking, about 5 children out of 100,000, if my math is correct. Now, interestingly enough, in New South Wales, they looked at 3,103 schools, 4,600 nurseries in New South Wales, Australia. Of those, 27 children or teachers were infected with COVID. 18 later contracted COVID. And this was 27, 18, so we're talking 35 active cases out of 1,448 cases that were studied. So you can already see the rate is a bit higher here than in the European countries. 7 schools and nurseries were further tested out of this group, and they came across with the child-to-child infection rate of 0.3%. So we're talking 3 out of 1,000. Child-to-staff infection was 1%, so 1 out of 100. Okay. Staff-to-child infection rate was 1.5. So we're talking 15 out of 1,000 that got infected. Staff to staff went up 4.4%. So we're talking 44 out of 1,000. That was adult to adult. So it was substantially higher. I think the gist of this was that the rate of infection is much lower with children than with adults. So anyway, again,
that is dated. That information is definitely dated. Even if it's 2 months old, it is definitely dated. The key is you go and Google whatever the current infection rate is with the Delta variant, and one of the things that is brought up more and more often recently is the fact that children had some kind of, I won't use the word immunity, but they had a better resistance to the earlier virus. This other virus, depending on whether you're talking to WHO or CDC, is hundreds of times more contagious. And the thing is that's the issue. That's what's starting. These children now are starting to get sick with this new version. And that's of my concern now. This is a whole new world that nobody's really ready for. And my main concern is this doesn't morph into something similar to like SARS, where instead of you're talking about a 1 to 3% death rate, it's 10 times that. You'll be filling morgues from here to Zanzibar.
When did this happen? When did this happen in the United States?
What's that?
SARS.
It hasn't, thank God.
No, but
that was very limited, and that was a very contained disease, and that was, I think it was a decade or two ago when SARS came about. We've had all these different viruses. Even you look back at AIDS, back in the early 80s. I mean, it seems that we're being struck more and more often by some kind of viral attacks. And viruses, by their nature, morph into something different. And the thing is that now we've got a disease that is more infectious and more lethal than, let's say, the old flu that, we still lost over 50,000 people a year. That was perfectly tolerable for everybody. They say, for older people get a flu shot. Well, once it starts involving young children, now there's a bit more concern. I mean, they're older folks like ourselves, and if they don't get their flu shot, they're running a risk. But you should be throwing those risks at, 5-year-olds.
Yes, I can't. That's true. My question is, first of all, is there an effective test to tell the difference between the Delta variant and COVID? Because we're talking about 2 different threats, correct?
I am told that, yes, they can easily identify the difference.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a medical person, but again, for what I've heard, and you can put that in quotation marks, I tend to believe national broadcast television, and of course I'm not talking about some of the sensational television channels, but the actual, like the CBS, NBC type of broadcasts, have all said that this disease, this variant is much more severe and much more contagious, and also is discernible against the older COVID-19 virus.
And
so you can't tell the difference.
Right. And what about the infection rates? All right. What I'm going to do, because otherwise we risk going in a circle, is I will look up on my own through the CDC website and other sources. I'm going to tell you, Kurt, I'm suspect of mainstream media's coverage of what's happening because I don't think it's complete. At one point, they were reporting anybody that went into a hospital as having COVID, and the hospitals were instructed to treat all cases as if they were COVID. And of course, that artificially raised the number of cases. Now, my trust started.
I heard that as well.
My trust in the numbers, my trust in the reporting went down the toilet after a couple of instances where the numbers were fudged. And we entered into a realm that I call fear porn, where they're pushing you with fear, and they're giving you a constant diet of fear without concrete evidence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, from what you've said, and from what you've said about the Delta variant, and especially the cases in Texas, because Texas is a case in and of itself, like Florida, where they've gone an independent path as far as preventive measures. I will look that up and get back next week. I do want to, what I'm going to do is I did have a film clip, but we're out of time, so I'm going to hold that film clip and start with it next week, the film clip from the mental health practitioner who works with children and discusses some of the side effects that she has noticed from the mask wearing and the imposed alienation between students and teachers, even if it's just a visual alienation through the use of the mask, or the stay at home and learn remotely, which I think it also deserves further attention as to how that affects students further down the line, their emotional state. So why don't we stop there? I will do some more homework, Kurt, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Okay.
All right. So everybody, I hope that was food for thought, and please stay tuned. We're going to continue this discussion next Thursday at 5:45. And as always, these broadcasts are available. They're loaded within a day or two on YouTube, Falls Area Community Television, and you can watch the program, or perhaps hopefully recommend that a friend or neighbor watch the program at a later date. So, Kurt, I'm going to say das Vidania, mein Drug, and we'll see each other on Saturday. And everyone, I wish you have good weekend and God's blessings on you and your family. Cheers.
Take
Cheers,
care.
Kurt. You too. Bye.